Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Valenzuela, and this is Memories of My Education. Early on, I have some pretty vivid memories of my home life really affecting my school life. I was being raised by my mom, who was an addict at the time, and my dad was away in the military. And as you would imagine, things were just not good at home. And so that meant that things were also not good at school. I was being picked on, and I was really just struggling, not just socially, but also academically. And to my knowledge, there were no interventions that were taking place, and there was no reporting going on about what was happening at home. My dad caught wind of all of this and got full custody of me. And in second grade, I was transferred to a different school where I was receiving interventions to kind of get me back on track. In third grade, I transferred schools again, this time because we moved in with my grandmother who lived in Paramount. I started at a school where I was one of five students. I'm sorry, one of five white students. And it was predominantly African American and Hispanic student population. And almost immediately, I was entered into the GATE program. I 100% believe that assumptions were made about me simply because I was white and because I could read well. So I was put into GATE, which at the time really wasn't any kind of enrichment, but rather just extra work. While at this school, though, I was heavily influenced by one of my favorite teachers, Miss Forsyth. She is why I became a journalist and later a teacher. She just really treated everybody fairly and the same, and didn't have any favorites and just really supported us and challenged us so we can meet our potential no matter what our ethnicity or our gender was. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me about the school when I think about my educational memories is that when I was in fifth grade, the district had decided to turn our school into an intermediate school. So when I was in fifth grade, the following year, the school would become a K through six. The next year, when I was in seventh grade, K through seven, and so on. And really, what was unfortunate about that was that the school was not prepared for this change. And teachers were teaching subjects they really had no business teaching. Moving on to high school, my dad did not want me to go to Paramount High School. At the time, there was a lot of gang activity, a lot of violence. So I went on permit to a school in Downey. And I was then surrounded by large white and Asian populations, which was a culture shock for me. I wasn't used to that. It also made a huge academic difference because there were higher expectations due to the demographics of the school. And come to find out, I really was just kind of an average student. I got good grades. I was heavily involved in sports and clubs and whatnot, but I really was just kind of average compared to how I was thought of at my intermediate school. One thing that stood out to me about high school was that even though I was a pretty well-rounded student, I was advised not to apply for UC because of my SAT scores. I took the SATs multiple times, did the tutoring classes, and I got the same exact score each time. So I didn't apply to UC. And I'm still a little bitter about that because I just feel like I had a lot to offer those schools, but because of one test score, I was advised not to apply because I wouldn't get in or even be considered. Moving on to my college experience, I've had such great experience at Cal State Long Beach. I really have, from working for the Daily 49er and really making my family's dream come true and being the first college graduate in my family. But one thing that stood out to me in my undergrad program was in my English 100 class, we were tasked with writing a essay where we had to like interpret an ad, and I received a bad grade for it, not because my argument was weak or my evidence was weak, but because the professor felt that my interpretation was wrong. And as an English teacher, I think that's very ironic because English is subjective, and I just didn't think it was fair to be graded down because he disagreed with me, even though my argument was solid and had evidence. So that really stood out to me as I went through my undergrad program and later on when I became a teacher. Moving on to my teaching credential program, I had another weird experience in my English 337 class, which was, if I recall correctly, like a technology in the classroom type of class. I had asked the professor if I could turn something in early because I was getting married and I was going to be on my honeymoon. And I wanted to turn in an assignment early, and he remarked like, who gets married in their school year, and wouldn't let me turn it in. And I instead got a B in the class. I was the only class I got a B in my credential program because he wouldn't let me turn this in early. And so that also stood out to me as I went into my teaching career about being empathetic and sensitive to people in their lives, especially when they're wanting to make arrangements ahead of time. Student teaching was such a great experience. I really fell in love with teaching, but quickly realized that there were lots of hoops to jump through in order to become a teacher. And then once you became a teacher, there just really wasn't a lot of support and accountability once you were there. I had another issue with another test with TPAs. I could not pass one of my TPAs. It was the oddest thing. I submitted it 2 different times, and I had one more chance to submit it before I had to, like, I don't know, do a bunch of stuff. So I went to this class that Long Beach State offered on a Saturday. I had to pay for it, and it wasn't helpful at all. Like, they couldn't tell me what I was doing wrong on the TPA, how I can improve it. So I just kind of felt like I was backed into this corner and I didn't know how to help myself. Fortunately, I don't know what I did, but it was good enough to pass, and here I am. So um, getting into my teaching career, my first year of teaching, like many of our first years of teaching, is about surviving. I was told many times, do all the things so you can keep your job. One thing that stood out to me in my first year of teaching was that I got reprimanded for reading a passage out loud to my students. They were doing instructional rounds with district personnel, and when they stepped into my room, I was reading a chapter from a book called Freak Almighty. I was teaching seventh grade at the time, and I got reprimanded in front of my students for reading out loud because that wasn't best practice. I couldn't say anything because I'm a probationary teacher, but thankfully my department chair stood up for me and let them know that it was best practice to do passage pulls and to read to kids. But it was very interesting when you have district personnel who have not been in the classroom for so long trying to tell you, someone who just got out of a credential program, what was best practice. My third year of teaching, I was RIFed. The RIF happened in our district as a result of a salary fight. Our union was fighting for better salary. The district said, if you want more money, we have to lay teachers off. I believe there were 59 of us that got RIFed. At the time, obviously, your performance and involvement in the school doesn't matter. It's simply based off of seniority. And I was asked to return, as well as every single other person that was RIFed was asked to return 2 weeks before school started. My 6th year of teaching was the pandemic. This was a blessing and a curse for many of us. It exposed many flaws in our systems. I encountered problems I never had experienced before, but it really did make me a better teacher. The one thing that really added a lot of extra stress on top of everything else that I was going through was that I was expected to make subplans for someone on medical leave the whole year. So I was the department chair, and we had somebody in my department that was out on medical leave and kept extending it every 30 days. And for some reason, I was responsible for his subplans. To make some connections here, and on terms of the micro level, my experiences and connections with specific teachers and coaches had such a heavy influence and impact on the kind of person and teacher that I am today. I learned very early on that there is power at the front of the classroom, and that power can be used for good and bad. On the mezzo level, programs that were offered to me during my education, such as GATE and clubs and sports honors courses, really provided rich social and academic opportunities, and they kept me accountable in attaining good grades and maintaining good attendance and behavior. On the macro level, experiences surrounding familiar structures, race, and gender all really speak to the societal expectations that were valued during my school years. Additionally, outcomes-based education reforms really valued proficiency over learning, and this held stakeholders to higher standards and expectations. So this is probably why I couldn't apply to a UC. I had the whole package except for this one test score, and to them, that was what would be considered proficient rather than me being a holistic learner. Thank you for your time. Have a great night.